From a man whose high school yearbook voted him most likely to die of blunt force trauma, this is the Daniel Natal Show. Conservatives love to joke about companies that virtue signal and lose money, like KFC with its tone-deaf BLM pandering, or Target losing $1 billion after adopting their position on transgender bathrooms. The cliche is, get woke, go broke. But this is exactly the opposite of why the largest corporations are doing this. In reality, they went broke, and then they got woke. Let me explain. In 2008, we experienced an economic catastrophe worse than the Great Depression due to subprime mortgages. In many ways, we still never recovered from it. Trillions of dollars of wealth evaporated overnight. Many banks and corporations lost their shirts. In the wake of this economic tsunami, corporate debt swelled, but nobody wanted to buy their bonds to help them out. Enter government bailouts. Ironically, the United States tapped a private sector individual named Larry Fink, the founder of BlackRock, to use money from the Treasury to buy back these toxic bonds to keep these businesses on life support. Why I said ironically is that Larry Fink was one of the inventors of the concept of debt securitization, which was a method used to hide risk that led to the subprime housing crisis in the first place. So basically, they hired the man who helped cause the meltdown to allay the damage from the aftermath, kind of like the fire department hiring the arsonist who caused the fire to put the fire out. At any rate, Larry Fink and BlackRock started to buy back these corporate bonds to give these flailing companies an infusion of cash to keep them on life support. But he attached strings. Any company that didn't go woke, he said, wouldn't get cash. Fink calls his woke program ESG. It stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. It's a system by which companies reorganize themselves internally and reorient themselves towards supporting the woke ideology. See here.
So where does BlackRock go moving forward? What does a man do when he already has everything? In 2019, people were petitioning against BlackRock for being among the top shareholders for oil and coal production. In fact, investing in heavy pollution industries has basically been the backbone of BlackRock's portfolio over the years. So according to Larry, they're making a push towards environmental, social, and sustainable investing. Whether or not they actually believe in this stuff is yet to be known. Nevertheless, it does appear they've made legit efforts to expand into this more eco-friendly market. With new environmentally focused products, they've partnered with activist investors, they backed a shareholder resolution basically forcing ExxonMobil to get serious about climate change. Larry even straight up wrote a letter telling companies that they need to, quote, contribute to society to receive his firm's support. This new push for sustainable investing, or ESG investing, is a big reason why you see so many corporations trying to appear woke these days.
If you want to invest in a company, they will, on their investor relations page, they'll show you their ESG score. ESG stands for Environmental, Social, Corporate Governance. And this is where the woke culture comes from. So they've created this kind of phony baloney rating system that says, well, if you, I'm exaggerating, but if you mention that you are, have a green agenda and you believe in carbon credits and you might trade some credits somewhere, then you get a higher score and therefore you're more investable. And it's very interesting to see how big investors like insurance company, institutional investors, they are steering away from anything that does not have the right ESG rating. And so in order to have investors continue to be interested in the stock, which is important for the company, for its perception, certainly for the officers of the company and the shareholders, you have to move this along continuously. And so it's very simple to see why doing a woke ad as Nike or as any other company, Pride Month is fantastic because Pride is easy. Throw up some flags, show the right people, trans, whatever, and you got a high ESG score.
So the black in BlackRock is akin to blackmail, as Larry Fink tells companies that if they don't adopt woke ideologies, they won't get any cash. BlackRock has $9 trillion under its management. That's trillion with a T. BlackRock has a bigger GDP than every country on Earth, except for two. They control almost every major financial institution, media outlet, or pharmaceutical firm that you can imagine. Here are some of the large investment banks that they own.
First and foremost, BlackRock is the largest asset management firm on the planet. They hold stocks, ownership of companies, property, and a ton of other stuff, of course with the main purpose of driving profit for themselves and their shareholders. And they own a part of almost everything. And when I say everything, I really mean everything. Let me explain how. The names on the screen are the 7 biggest banks in America. And in some way or another, if you are an American that gets loans, does your banking, has investments, or has your pension fund, you are likely connected to one of these banks. But who owns these banks? Well, in one way or another, BlackRock does. BlackRock is either the largest or one of the largest shareholders in all of these 7 banks. All of them. So if you are part of the general American banking system, it's likely you don't really have a choice whether or not to deal with BlackRock, and you're putting your trust in them to hold some of your money. You might think you have a choice with banking, but really it's an illusion of choice.
In short, after the 2008 financial crash that Larry Fink himself helped to create, millions of companies were insolvent. Fink offered to buy their bonds and give them loans, but only if they went woke. As I said, it wasn't go woke, get broke. It was get broke, go woke. It's why the Gillette Corporation reluctantly alienated their own core audience by pushing transgenderism in their commercials. Or why Listerine suddenly has rainbow flags on everything. Or why the CEO of Chick-fil-A was on his hands and knees washing the feet of black people to show support for Black Lives Matter. He wasn't really on his knees before the black person before which he was genuflecting. He was on his knees to BlackRock. If all these corporations wanted to get loans, they had to raise their so-called ESG rating. To do this, they had to expand their woke activities. By the way, ESG was launched in 2019, the same year that Larry Fink became a trustee of the World Economic Forum. Keep all this in mind when people like Governor DeSantis in Florida make news by trying to fight critical race theory in schools, such as in articles like DeSantis introduces Stop Woke Act, says CRT is elite-driven phenomenon. He's right. CRT is a subset of ESG, and it's being driven by the Davos crowd at the World Economic Forum and by every company that Larry Fink extorts into compliance. Keep all this in mind to understand that these institutions and companies have been more than blackmailed, and their critics have been more than blacklisted. All of these organizations have been BlackRocked. If you've gotten this far, you must be partial to our content. If you haven't already, head to thenewamerican.com and subscribe to our print magazine published twice a month and daily online. It's the essential news source for freedom-loving Americans. The New American Magazine is guided by our support of the U.S. Constitution and the principles upon which the Constitution is based. We want to restore and retain the values and vision that made America great, limited government under the Constitution, the freedoms our Constitution guarantees, and the personal responsibility a free people must exercise to stay free. To learn more, subscribe to our magazine. Visit thenewamerican.com.